It's fantasy booking time. Everyone loves a bit of fantasy booking. Alright folks, what's the crack? Welcome back. And with the Cruiserweight Classic coming up where the wrestlers are representing their countries, with the European Championships now reaching fever pitch with all the excitement with Wales doing so well. Come on the Wales. I thought I would put together a kind of fantasy booked WWE World Cup. If the WWE were to do a World Cup with their wrestlers where the wrestlers represented their countries, how might they go about that? Well, here's what we're going to take a look at in this video. I hope you enjoy. Let's go! Okay, so basic rules here. We're going to have 8 teams from all across the world. We're basically just going to start in the quarterfinals and go from there, semi-finals, final. We're not going to do a third, fourth place playoff. Fuck that shit. So as you can probably tell, or may not, I don't know, I'm from Ireland, and Ireland has had a great resurgence of wrestling recently, with Shamu starting it, Becky following, and now of course Finn Balor being right up there next in line, possibly as the next big thing in wrestling. So Ireland, first one in. Okay, so next up is Samoa. Not American Samoa, not Western Samoa, just Samoa. We will get into the wrestlers who are representing each country very soon, but for now, second country in is Samoa. Next up is the English, obviously, and you may be surprised who I pick for Team England now that Wade Barrett has been released. So the English are in. After that is the USA, and my god, such a strong pool of talent to pick from. Hopefully I will have done your country justice for the Americans. Next up is the strong favourites, the Japanese. The Japanese team in this are just 3 of the best wrestlers in the world right now, so probably strong favourites here. The Canadians, obviously with that rich heritage in wrestling, some great Canadian talent on the roster right now, making it very hard to pick the team. And the last team from the Americas is of course Mexico, even more heritage of wrestling in Mexico. And rounding it out is the rest of Europe. There's some great talent on the roster from Europe, and it's not fair that they get left out of this, so let's throw them in there with the rest of Europe. And there are your teams, folks. There are your 8 teams. Let's get into who is actually representing who now. Okay, so starting the teams off with Ireland, and I'm going to be obviously putting my bias off on the shelf for this video as much as I can, but look at that team, the powerhouse Shamu, Becky, obviously up and coming, will be a women's champion one day, and Finn Balor, the darling of the internet. Oh, he will be going straight to the top, so a very strong team for Ireland. Moving on to Samoa, and I'm going to get a bit technical. I know that Samoa Joe isn't really kind of technically Samoan, but we're going to go with the grandmother, grandfather European football rule if you follow European football. And of course you got the dominating Nia Jax and Jimmy or Jay, take your pick from the Usos. The English are in a bit of a tricky spot because of course Wade Barrett just got released. So you have Neville there, you have Paige there, but you've got to fill a spot. But there's one other Englishman, he kind of retired, but let's bring him back out of retirement, and that is of course William Regal. He goes on to Team England. Now the US have got obviously loads of people we could pick from here, and I'm going to start off by picking AJ Styles, one of the most all-round wrestlers in the world right now. Couple that with the best wrestler possibly in the world right now, Seth Rollins. I mean, can you really go wrong with that pick? And when it comes to the diva, the woman, it's going to be hard to look past Sasha. Sasha has got it all as a woman wrestler, so it's very hard to pick anyone else. Charlotte, sure. Becky, sure. But what's wrong with Sasha? You got to complain with Sasha? I don't think so. So now you got the Japanese, a very strong team, possibly the favourites in this whole tournament. Hideo Itami, Nakamura, the king of strong style, and of course Asuka, the women's champion. Probably the best all-round team in this competition. The Canadians, very hard to pick this, so I went with the experience of Jericho and Natalya, and just the up and coming. I think Zayn is not as good as Owens when it comes to just being a powerhouse, putting people down. And I apologize if you happen to be Mexican. I apologize to you right now, but unfortunately you have no Mexican divas that at least I can tell, so you have to get Eva Marie, who has got some slight Mexican descendancy in her blood, unfortunately. So you've got Dario, Kalisto, and Eva Marie. I'm so sorry. And the rest of the world, or rest of Europe I should say, apologies, rest of Europe gets 2 powerhouses, Cesaro, Rusev, and Rusev's fine fiance Lana. Even though she's not much of a wrestler, that will probably go in against them later in the competition. So there you go, there are your 8 teams, looking pretty well I think. And to do the draw, I basically just went onto random.org and wrote out the list in the same way that I've given it to you there, and clicked on randomize, and that is the order we got: Europe, Ireland, Mexico, Canada, England, Samoa, Japan, USA. So those will be the pairings for the quarterfinals, and we will lose one of the favorites in the first round. Either Japan or USA will be going home first round. Very interesting. Okay, so basically it will be 2 single matches with the guys and a singles match between the women as well. Kind of like, think of it like Top Trumps, or if you've played WWE Supercard, kind of think of it like that as well. Who would win in the kind of one-on-one fight? Bit of fantasy booking, bit of reality thrown in there, but let's get into it with the Irish versus the rest of Europe. Cesaro versus Balor, Lana versus Becky, Rusev versus Sheamus. First up, we have the cracking match, potentially, of Finn Balor versus Cesaro. What an epic wrestling match that would be. And I can see people now giving out to me for saying this, but ultimately, I'm not being biased here. I genuinely think Finn Balor would be able to beat Cesaro. I know he's a powerhouse, but Finn he's adept to being in the ring with people like Kevin Owens, people like Samoa Joe, who can put a beating on you, and he can take that beating, absorb it, and beat your ass back with it. Follow up with that Becky, an actually accomplished wrestler who's come through the ranks, versus Lana, and to me that's a no contest. Becky wins all the way. Ireland win 2-0. We don't even have to go near Rusev versus Sheamus. It's in the bag. Don't bother with that. Ireland go through to the semis. The next quarterfinal is Mexico versus Canada, and Mexico probably the weakest team in this league just because of Eva Marie and Kalisto. I love Kalisto, but he's just a bit small, and unfortunately Natalya will dance rings around Eva Marie. Jericho will be able to put Kalisto away, and of course, in my opinion, Kevin Owens would have no problem getting rid of Alberto Del Rio. So a complete whitewash for Canada there. On the other side of the bracket now, you have the English versus the Samoans. Neville versus Joe. I mean, that's just... I know Neville's very good, very quick, very fast, but to me, he will just get swatted out of the sky by Joe and put down. So, unfortunately, I'd have to give the win to Joe on that one. Unfortunately, again for the English, Paige, as good as she is, she's got a couple of good submission moves there, a good finisher move, but would she be able to do that to Nia Jax? I'm not too sure. She hasn't been in the best form recently, or even on TV too much recently. So unfortunately, Nia Jax will beat Paige as well, thus basically eliminating England. If it's any consolation, I would have had William Regal, even 5 or 6 years ago, beat Jimmy or Jey Uso, no problem. So unfortunately for the English, the Samoans are into the semis. And now it's time for the final quarterfinal, probably the biggest matchup in this World Cup. America versus Japan. Matches will be AJ Styles versus Itami, Rollins versus Nakamura, and Sasha Banks versus Asuka. 3 cracking matches if we ever were to get them in real life. Obviously we have had some of them in real life. If you follow New Japan, go watch New Japan. Okay, so AJ Styles versus Hideo Itami. AJ Styles knows the Japanese style inside out. He's wrestled these guys very often for many years. So, on that basis, we are going to give the win to AJ Styles for America in the first match. Second, you have Rollins versus Nakamura. God, that just sounds great when you say it. But Rollins versus Nakamura, King of Strong Style versus the man. Who will get the upper hand for their country here? And in my opinion, with Rollins not knowing too much about the New Japan style and the King of Strong Style in particular, I'm just going to edge it for Nakamura because he can kick the head off anybody. So that brings it down to a dead heat. The deciding match, Sasha versus Asuka. Another great potential match. But as brilliant as Sasha is, Asuka has a chant of, "You're gonna get your fucking head kicked in." And if you have a chant like that, it's hard to go against and bet against that. So Asuka's kicks just outdo Sasha's submissions, meaning the Japanese get a 2-1 victory over America to send them into the semis and send America home. Wow, those would be great matches. I would love to see all of them. So here is your semi-final bracket. We will have Ireland versus Canada and Samoa versus Japan. This will be great in real life. They should well do a little WWE World Cup. The fans would love it. But anyway, let's get into it right now. Ireland versus Canada, first semi-final. It will be Finn versus Owens, Becky versus Natalya, which is happening in real life right now. and Sheamus versus Chris Jericho. And I think it goes without saying, I know there's a lot of Kevin Owens fanboys out there, I am one myself, but Finn has taken care of Kev no problem in NXT, so he will do so again in the semi-final here. Becky versus Natalya, I'm just going to give the edge to the heel Natalya. I think she's just obviously more of a ring veteran, so we can give Natalya the win on that one. Now we come to the dead rubber. Shamu versus Jericho. Who is going to get the win on this one? And Jericho, who's been on a good run recently, but Shamu's been doing well as well, and has been more consistently up towards the top of the card, winning championships. So, as unbiased as I'm trying to be, I have to kind of give it to Ireland to go into the final. Comment down below, see if you see it differently. Hopefully we can get something going, but that's the way I see it. Hopefully you're not thinking I'm biased, but let's get on, let's keep on going. Now on to the second semi-final, and it might look a bit obvious on paper, but it's far from it once you go through it. So Joe versus Itami, which will be a great little match. Itami a bit smaller obviously than Joe, and I reckon we have to give the win to Joe on that one, as well as Itami can go and wrestle. Nia Jax versus Asuka. We've already seen it happen at TakeOver. Asuka got the win. She's still a champion, so Asuka gets the win here. And unfortunately for the Uso, who gets his head kicked in, I think it's a bit of a non-starter for one of the Usos versus Nakamura. I'm sorry Usos, I'm sorry Samoa. The Japanese kick the head off you and advance to the final, where we have Ireland versus Japan. Wow. And not wasting any time, let's get straight in to the final. It will be Finn Balor versus Hideo Itami, Becky Lynch versus Asuka, and Shamu versus Nakamura. Now obviously Balor knows Hideo Itami very well. He made his debut to help him versus the Ascension in NXT. Great debut. So just by that, and he spent many years learning his craft in Japan, in the dojos. So on that level, Finn Balor gets the win to put Ireland 1-0 up in this particular contest. Next up is Becky versus Asuka. Of course, Becky's in the main roster, but Asuka will be there any day now. She deserves it. She's the current NXT Women's Champion, and her feet are some of the most dangerous weapons on that women's roster right now, and it's hard, really hard, to look past Asuka. So Asuka gets the win to level up the tie in the final, one apiece going into the deciding match. Shamu versus Nakamura. What a hard-hitting match that would be, and I'm pretty sure the two men can take just as much as they can give. However, I think Nakamura can give and take just a little bit more than Sheamus can. It will be such a good match. It will happen eventually on the roster, but for now and in this instance, that will give Nakamura the win to put them 2-1 up in the final. Game, set, match. Your winners and the first ever WWE World Cup champions, ladies and gentlemen, the Japanese.